My in-laws showed up at our honeymoon hotel on day 2. My husband knew the whole time, so I picked up the phone and called the front desk, and I'd do it again. On the second morning of my honeymoon, someone knocked on our suite door. My husband was in the shower. I looked through the peephole, and there she was, my mother-in-law, sun hat, tote bag, a smile like she'd been invited. She hadn't been. Neither had my father-in-law, standing right behind her with a rolling carry-on. I stepped back from that door and I felt the ground shift under me, not because of her, because of what it meant that she was there, because of what it meant that he had let it happen. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I waited until they left, and then I called the front desk. The flight from Chicago to Maui took just over 9 hours, and for every single one of those hours, Claire Whitfield held her husband's hand, not out of nervous habit. Not because of turbulence, though there was a little over the Rockies. She held his hand because she wanted to. Because after 3 years of dating Nathan Hartwell and 6 months of planning a wedding that had somehow grown from an intimate gathering of 40 into a full production with 200 guests, a string quartet, and enough white roses to fill a greenhouse, she finally felt like she could breathe. They were married. Really, truly married. She caught her reflection in the small oval window as the plane banked over the Pacific. She barely recognized herself. Not in a bad way, but in the way that happens when something shifts so fundamentally inside you that your own face seems updated, refreshed. Her dark brown hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands falling at her jaw. Her green eyes looked lighter than usual, or maybe that was just the quality of light above the clouds. She was wearing Nathan's old Northwestern hoodie over her airplane outfit, which was not the most bridal thing she had ever done, but Nathan had looked at her when she put it on and said, "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." And she had believed him completely. Nathan was asleep now, his head tipped back, his long legs cramped awkwardly in the seat. Even unconscious, he had a particular calm to him, the kind of stillness that had attracted Claire to him in the first place, back when they met at a mutual friend's birthday party in Lincoln Park. He had been standing near the kitchen doorway, not quite part of any conversation, holding a beer he wasn't drinking. She'd walked over because she recognized the look on his face. It was the same look she wore at parties she didn't want to be at, polite, composed, privately counting down the minutes. They had talked for 4 hours that night. They left the party together and walked along the lake until after midnight, talking about everything and nothing. She remembered thinking, this man is going to matter to me. She hadn't been wrong. What she hadn't fully understood then, what had taken her 2.5 years to truly see, was how much of Nathan's life had been quietly shaped by other people. Specifically, by his parents. Diane and Gerald Hartwell were not cruel people. Claire had understood that from the beginning. They were warm in the way that well-maintained fires are warm, steady, consistent, and faintly suffocating if you stood too close. Diane called Nathan every morning, not texted, called. Gerald had opinions about Nathan's career, Nathan's apartment, Nathan's car, Nathan's financial decisions, and he shared those opinions with the easy confidence of a man who had never once been told to mind his own business. The wedding had been a preview of what Claire was beginning to understand was the full picture. Diane had inserted herself into the planning from the first week of their engagement. It had started innocuously enough. Suggestions about florists, opinions about venues. But within a month, it had become something else. The guest list had doubled with Hartwell family acquaintances Claire had never met. The cake flavor had been changed without Claire being consulted. The rehearsal dinner, which Claire and Nathan had planned as a low-key dinner at a restaurant they loved, had been quietly transformed by Diane into a catered event at the Hartwell home, with toasts prepared and a slideshow of Nathan's childhood that ran for 20 minutes and mentioned Claire exactly twice. Nathan had apologized each time. He always apologized. "She means well," he would say, and Claire believed him. And then It would happen again. She had told herself it would be different after the wedding. That marriage would draw a new boundary naturally, the way coastlines form, not by force, but by geography. She and Nathan would be their own unit now, their own family. The Hartwells would recede to their appropriate distance, like parents always did once their children built real lives of their own. She was still telling herself this when the plane touched down in Kahului. The hotel was everything the website had promised and somehow more. The Grand Wailea sat at the edge of Wailea Beach like something dreamed rather than built. Sweeping white architecture, cascading pools, the smell of plumeria so thick in the air it felt like a physical thing. Their suite was on the 4th floor with a direct ocean view, and when the bellhop opened the door and Claire walked through it and stood at the lanai railing and looked out at the Pacific glittering in the late afternoon light, she felt something release in her chest that she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Nathan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. He pressed his lips to the back of her neck. "Hi, wife," he said. She laughed. "Hi, husband. We made it." "We made it," she agreed. They ordered room service that night and ate on the lanai as the sun went down, the sky doing that particular Maui thing where it cycled through shades of orange and pink and deep violet in the span of 20 minutes. As if it were showing off. They talked about nothing important, a podcast Nathan had listened to on the plane, a book Claire was halfway through, whether they wanted to try surfing lessons or stick to just lying on the beach. She felt, for the first time in months, fully present, fully herself. Her phone buzzed on the table. She flipped it over. A text from Diane. "Hope you two had a safe flight. The weather looks beautiful in Maui right now." Claire stared at the message for a moment. Then she set her phone face down and reached for her wine glass. "Your mom texted," she said. Nathan glanced at her phone. "I'll deal with her later." "It's fine," Claire said. "It's fine." She believed herself mostly. That night, with the ocean breeze moving through the open lanai door and the sound of the waves a constant low rhythm below them, she fell asleep next to her husband and felt, despite everything, like the woman she had always hoped she would become. She had no idea what was already in motion. Claire knew the exact time because she had just looked at the clock on the nightstand, calculating how long they could reasonably stay in bed before the breakfast buffet stopped serving. Nathan was in the shower. She could hear the water running, hear him humming something tuneless and cheerful, and she was lying on her stomach in the white hotel robe, reading 3 pages of her book and feeling, in an uncomplicated way, completely happy. The knock was 2 sharp raps, then a pause, then 3 more. She frowned. Housekeeping didn't knock like that. Room service didn't knock like that. Someone who knew how to knock on a door knocked like that. She pulled the robe tighter and crossed the room. She looked through the peephole. For a full 3 seconds, her brain refused to process what she was seeing. Diane Hartwell stood in the hallway in a floral wrap dress and a wide-brimmed sun hat, holding a tote bag printed with pineapples. Beside her, Gerald Hartwell stood in khaki shorts and a polo shirt, a rolling carry-on beside him, squinting at his phone with the expression he always wore when he was trying to read something in a small font. Claire stepped back from the door. Her first thought was, "I am hallucinating." Her second thought was, "I am absolutely not hallucinating." "Nathan," she said. Her voice came out level, which surprised her. The shower kept running. "Nathan." Louder this time. Another knock at the door. "Nathan, honey, it's Mom. We can hear you in there." Claire heard the shower cut off. A moment later, Nathan appeared in the bathroom doorway with a towel around his waist and water still in his hair. And for just a moment, one single, crystallizing moment, she watched his expression cycle through confusion, recognition, and something she could only describe as the particular collapse of a man who has been caught. "Claire, your parents are at the door," she said. She was surprised by how calm she sounded. She felt like the inside of a thundercloud. Would you like to explain that? He opened the door himself. She let him. Diane swept in with the energy of a woman who had never in her life felt unwelcome anywhere. She kissed Nathan on the cheek, said, "Doesn't this suite look wonderful?" Surveyed the room with the assessing eye of someone appraising real estate, and turned to Claire with a wide smile. "Claire, sweetheart! Surprise!" She spread her arms. "We thought, what better way to celebrate you two starting your lives together than to be here for the first week? Gerald found a wonderful rate at the hotel down the road. The Fairmont, actually, so we're not even in your hair. We'll just spend days together." Gerald had wheeled his carry-on inside without being invited and was now standing near the lanai, looking at the ocean view with a satisfied expression, as though he had personally arranged it. "Gorgeous," he said. "Good choice on the hotel, Nathan, although I still think the Four Seasons would have been a better—" "How did you know which hotel we were at?" Claire asked. Silence dropped over the room like a curtain. Diane's smile held. "Well, Nathan mentioned it, of course." Claire turned to her husband. Nathan had put on a shirt at some point. She hadn't noticed him do it, and was standing near the window with his hands in the pockets of his shorts, not quite meeting her eyes. "You mentioned it," Claire said. "It wasn't—" he started. "He was excited," Diane said smoothly. "He told us about the resort, and Gerald and I just thought, well, Maui is somewhere we've always wanted to go, and the timing just—" "Diane," Claire said. She said it quietly, but something in her tone stopped the older woman mid-sentence. "I need a moment alone with my husband, please." Diane blinked. Something shifted in her expression, a micro-contraction there and gone. "Of course," she said in a voice that suggested this request was mildly eccentric, but she was choosing to be gracious about it. She took Gerald's arm and steered him toward the door. "We'll be at the pool, room 214 at the Fairmont if you need us." The door clicked shut. Claire stood very still in the center of the room. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Did you know they were coming?" Nathan ran a hand through his damp hair. He sat down on the edge of the bed. "I didn't plan it. Mom called last week and she asked which resort, and I told her I didn't think she was actually going to—" "You told her where we were going on our honeymoon," Claire said, "after I specifically asked you not to tell anyone the details." I know, and I'm sorry, but she asked, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of it." "Nathan." She sat down beside him. "They're here. They're at the pool of a hotel down the road from our honeymoon suite. That is a big deal. It's just for a week. We can still have our time, dinners together, don't have to—" "Stop." She looked at him. "Can you hear yourself?" He looked at his hands. She had met Amy Callahan, her best friend since college, for coffee 2 weeks before the wedding. Amy, who had been watching the Hartwell situation unfold for 3 years, and who chose her words with the careful precision of someone who understood the exact weight they carried, had said, "Claire, I love Nathan. I do. But at some point you have to ask whether he's choosing you, not because of his parents, but despite them." She had told Amy she was being dramatic. Sitting on the edge of that hotel bed in Maui, her husband unable to look at her on the second morning of their honeymoon, she thought about that conversation for a long time. "I need to take a walk," she said finally. "I need you to think about what you're going to do about this." "What do you mean? What am I going to do?" "I mean exactly what I said." She stood up, took her sun hat from the dresser and walked to the door. "You're my husband. That means something. Act like it." She left him there. She walked down to the beach, and she stood at the edge of the water, and she let the waves wash over her feet for a long time, and she thought about love and what it required of people, and whether the distance between who Nathan was and who she needed him to be was bridgeable. She didn't have an answer yet. But she was starting to understand the question. They had dinner with the Hartwells that first night. Nathan had arranged it, or more accurately, Diane had arranged it, and Nathan had confirmed it without asking Claire. And by the time Claire returned from the beach, the reservation had already been made at a restaurant in Wylia that Diane had selected from a list she had apparently prepared before leaving Chicago. Claire went. She told herself it was the mature thing to do. She told herself one dinner was not the end of the world. The restaurant was beautiful, open air, lit with strings of warm light, the ocean visible from their table. Under other circumstances, Claire would have loved it. Instead, she sat across from Diane Hartwell and watched the woman orchestrate the evening with the practiced fluency of someone who had been doing it for decades. Diane ordered for the table before anyone else had fully read the menu. Diane redirected every topic of conversation that veered toward Claire's work or Claire's family. Diane told a 20-minute story about Nathan's childhood that was clearly, Claire understood, not a story at all, but a message. I was here first. I know him in ways you never will. Gerald ate his steak and said little and watched his wife with a quiet approval that Claire found, in some ways, more unnerving than anything Diane said outright. On the drive back to the hotel, Nathan reached across the center console and put his hand on Claire's knee. "Thank you," he said. "I know that wasn't easy." "No," she agreed, "it wasn't. She just loves being part of things. She loves being in control of things," Claire said. "There's a difference." Nathan didn't respond. She watched his jaw tighten in the glow of the dashboard lights and felt something in her chest tighten too. Day 3 arrived with Diane at the pool by 9 in the morning, having somehow secured a cabana adjacent to the one Nathan had reserved for them. Claire came down to find her mother-in-law already settled in with a novel and a plate of fruit, and the particular territorial energy of a woman who considered this arrangement completely natural. Gerald was in the water doing laps with the methodical joylessness of a man completing a task. "Good morning, sweetheart," Diane said brightly. "I took the liberty of ordering you a coffee. You always have it with oat milk, right?" I remembered. Claire stared at her. "How did you know which cabana we had?" "Nathan mentioned it when he texted this morning." Diane smiled. "I hope you don't mind sharing. There's certainly plenty of room." That afternoon, Claire called Amy from the bathroom with the water running. "She's at our cabana," Claire said, her voice low and controlled. "She's at our cabana at our pool on our honeymoon because Nathan texted her the number this morning. Amy, he texted her the cabana number." Amy was quiet for a moment. "Oh, honey, I'm not overreacting. Tell me I'm not overreacting." "You are not overreacting," Amy said. "This is a pattern, Claire. It's always been a pattern. The question is whether Nathan sees it or whether he's just in it. He apologizes every time. He always apologizes." "Apologizing isn't the same as changing," Amy said. "You know that." Claire did know that. She had known it for a long time. She had been filing it under the category of things she would deal with later, after the engagement, after the wedding, after the honeymoon, after they were really settled. She was beginning to understand there would always be an after. Day 4 was the day she stopped waiting for Nathan to fix it. It happened at lunch. They were at a beachside restaurant, all 4 of them again, and Diane had just suggested, casually over her salad, in the tone of someone mentioning the weather, that she and Gerald had looked into extending their stay by another week, and that it would be so lovely to all drive together to the road to Hana, which was something she had always wanted to do. Claire put down her fork. Nathan said, "Mom, I don't know if—" "It's one day," Diane said. "One beautiful day trip, and then you two have the rest of the time to yourselves." "You said that about dinner the first night," Claire said. Diane looked at her. "I beg your pardon?" "You said dinner was just one dinner. Then you were at our cabana the next day. Now you want to extend your trip and join us for a day excursion." Claire's voice was steady. She was surprised by how steady it was. "I want to understand the plan, Diane. What does the full week look like, in your vision? The table went very quiet. Gerald set down his fork. Diane's expression cycled through something: surprise, offense, recalibration, and settled on a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I think you're being a little sensitive, sweetheart. We're family now. We're just trying to... Diane, Claire said, I'm asking a genuine question. Claire. Nathan's voice was a warning. She turned to look at her husband. He was pale. He was looking at her with an expression she recognized. The "please don't make this a thing" expression. The same one he had worn at the rehearsal dinner when she had quietly objected to the 20-minute slideshow. The same one he had worn 6 months ago when she had pointed out that Diane had contacted their florist directly and changed the centerpiece design. Something hardened in her. I'm going back to the room, she said. She stood up. I'll see you later, Nathan. Diane, Gerald, enjoy your lunch. She walked back to the hotel alone. The sun was sharp and bright, the air thick with salt. She walked through the lobby and into the elevator and stood there pressing the button for the 4th floor, and she thought, this is it. This is the thing I have been walking around for 3 years, and I have run out of room to keep walking around it. She sat on the lanai for an hour, watching the ocean, and she made a decision. Not an angry decision. Not a reactive one. A clear, deliberate, fully considered decision about what she was willing to accept as the terms of her own life. She picked up the phone on the bedside table and asked to be connected to the front desk. Scott Mercer, the hotel's guest relations manager, arrived at their suite 12 minutes after Claire called. He was a composed man in his mid-40s, with the quiet authority of someone who had managed every conceivable variety of hospitality emergency. And he listened to Claire without interruption as she explained the situation. She was precise. She did not dramatize. She told him that her in-laws had arrived at the resort uninvited during her honeymoon, that they had secured a cabana adjacent to her reserved one without her knowledge, and that they had made access to her room possible by obtaining information from her husband. She asked what her options were. Scott Mercer nodded slowly. As registered guests in this suite, you have full authority over who may access your room and who may use amenities reserved under your name. If you would like, I can ensure that no additional guests are granted access to your reserved spaces without your explicit authorization. I can also make clear to any individuals on the property that they are not to approach your room. I'd like that, Claire said. Specifically, I'd like you to inform Diane and Gerald Hartwell, they're staying at the Fairmont down the road, room 214, that they are not welcome at this hotel's amenities, and that any attempt to access our suite will result in their removal from the property. Scott Mercer's expression did not flicker. I'll take care of it personally, Mrs. Whitfield. Thank you, Claire said. After he left, she sat back in the chair by the lanai door and exhaled. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, she realized, but from the particular physical response that follows doing something you have needed to do for a very long time. Nathan returned to the room 40 minutes later. He came in quietly, the way people do when they're uncertain of the atmosphere they're walking into. He found Claire sitting at the small desk near the window, writing in the journal she had packed for the trip. My parents just called me, he said. I imagine they did, Claire said without looking up. The hotel manager told them to leave. Claire, they were... My mother was... Upset, Claire said. Yes. She was humiliated. Claire set down her pen and turned to look at her husband. He was standing near the door, still holding his room key, and he looked, she searched for the word, diminished, not angry, not defensive. Just diminished, in the specific way of a man caught between two opposing gravitational forces and unable to hold his own shape. Nathan, she said, sit down. He sat on the edge of the bed. I need to tell you some things, she said, and I need you to actually hear them, Not apologize, not explain, not tell me what your mother meant versus what she did. Just hear them. He nodded. Your mother has controlled your life since before I knew you, she said. I have watched her plan our wedding over my head, change decisions I made without consulting me, insert herself into every significant moment of our relationship. I have watched you let it happen and apologize for it afterward. And I have told myself every single time that it would get better, that marriage would change things, that we just needed to get through one more event, one more milestone. She paused. We have been married for 4 days, Nathan. 4 days. And we have spent 2 of those days having meals with your parents because your mother decided she was coming on our honeymoon and you did not stop it. Nathan opened his mouth. I'm not done, she said. He closed it. I love you, she said. I chose you completely and deliberately, and I am not walking away from this marriage, but I am telling you, as clearly as I can, that the way we have been operating is not a marriage. It's a performance of a marriage with your mother in the director's chair, and I am done performing. The silence in the room was absolute. Outside, the ocean moved in its ancient way, indifferent and constant. Claire could hear it from where she sat. I didn't know she was going to do this, Nathan said finally. His voice was quiet. I know you didn't plan it, Claire said, but you told her where we were, after I asked you not to tell anyone. Why did you do that? He was quiet for a long moment. Because it's easier. The honesty of it caught her off guard. It was the most honest thing he had said to her about his mother in 3 years, and it landed in the room with a particular weight. Easier than what? She asked. Than telling her no, he said. Than having her be disappointed. Than the whole thing that happens when she doesn't get what she wants. He looked up. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you've been managing her your entire life, Claire said. And I understand that, I do. But you are 32 years old, and you are my husband. And every time you choose the easier thing with her, you are choosing it instead of me. Nathan pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. He sat like that for a long time. When he looked up again, something in his face had changed, not fixed, not resolved, but cracked open in the way that things need to break before they can be rebuilt. What do you want me to do? He asked. I want you to call your parents, she said. I want you to tell them that you love them and that this trip was not appropriate and that they need to go home. Not because I made you, because you understand why. She's going to be furious. I know, Claire said. That's going to be true for a while, no matter what. The question is whether you can tolerate that for the sake of your marriage. Nathan stared at the phone on the nightstand for a long time. Then he reached for it. Claire got up and walked to the lanai. She gave him the room. She stood at the railing with her hands around a glass of water and watched a sea turtle surface and disappear in the water below the cliffs, and she thought, whatever happens next, I know who I am. That, she understood, was the thing you could not let anyone take from you, not even the people you loved. She heard his voice through the open door. She couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the tone, different from the usual Nathan on the phone with his mother tone, less accommodating, more certain. She looked at the ocean and let herself hope. The call lasted 37 minutes. Claire knew this because she had looked at her phone when Nathan came out to the lanai and it said 6:14, and she remembered that it had been 5:37 when he reached for the phone. 37 minutes. She thought about what it must have taken to fill them. He stood beside her at the railing for a moment without speaking. The evening was coming in slowly, the light going amber over the water. They're going home tomorrow, he said. Claire looked at him. His eyes were red at the edges. She reached over and took his hand. Was it bad? She asked. Yeah, he said, it was bad. He exhaled. My mother cried. My dad said that we were being ungrateful, that it was just a vacation and we were making it into something. What did you say? He was quiet for a moment. I said that I loved them, and that Claire was my wife, and that our honeymoon was ours, and that if they couldn't respect that, we were going to have a problem. He paused. And then my mother cried again. She'll be angry for a while, Claire said. I know. That's okay. Nathan turned to look at her. Is it, genuinely, is it okay? Because I feel like... He stopped, pressed his mouth together. I feel like I just blew up my family. You didn't blow up your family, Claire said carefully. You told your family where the line is. That's not destruction. That's the first time you've ever done that. It didn't feel like a line. It felt like a wall. It might feel that way for a while, she said. But walls and lines aren't the same thing. A line says this far and I love you. A wall says no further ever. You drew a line, Nathan, not a wall. He looked at her for a long time. How do you know that? Because you're still going to call your mother next week, she said. And the week after. You're not cutting her off. You're just establishing something. It's different. He nodded slowly. He looked back at the water. I'm sorry, he said. For real this time. Not the way I've been apologizing, where I apologize and then let the same thing happen again. I'm sorry for all of it. Claire leaned her head against his shoulder. I know you are. I didn't see it, he said. I saw parts of it, but I told myself it was just how she was, and it was harmless, and I didn't see it the way you were seeing it. You see it now, she said. Yeah, he said. I see it now. They stood there as the sun finished setting, and then they went inside, and they ordered room service again, and they ate on the lanai again, and this time there were no buzzing phones, no undercurrents, no quiet weight of something unresolved pressing on the evening, just the two of them, and the food, and the ocean below, and the stars coming out one by one over the dark water. The next 5 days were theirs. They drove the road to Hana on a Tuesday, just the two of them, stopping at every waterfall and black sand beach that caught their attention, eating malasadas from a roadside stand, getting lost twice on purpose and once by accident. Nathan was different on that drive, lighter somehow, like something had been set down. He laughed more easily. He reached for her hand without the faint distraction that had lived in him since they landed. They went snorkeling at Molokini Crater and swam alongside sea turtles in water so clear it felt impossible. They sat in on a traditional Hawaiian storytelling evening at a cultural center near Lahaina and listened to a kupuna speak about the concept of ohana, family, not as the people you were born to, but as the people you chose to build your life with and the responsibility that choice carried. Claire watched Nathan listen. She watched him absorb it. On their last night in Maui, they had dinner at a small restaurant in Kihei that a hotel employee had recommended. Off the tourist circuit, no views, just excellent food, and the kind of unhurried warmth that the best family restaurants have. Their waiter was a young man named Kai, who had grown up on the island, and who, when he discovered it was their honeymoon, brought them a small dessert at the end of the meal with a candle in it and said, Maui remembers the people who come here happy. Claire had laughed and Nathan had laughed, and it was one of those moments that she knew she would keep. On the plane home, somewhere over the Pacific, Nathan was the one who reached for her hand first. I've been thinking, he said. About what comes next, he said. With my parents, with us. He turned toward her. I want to see someone, a therapist or someone who can help me figure out why it's always been so hard for me to just... He gestured vaguely. To just be my own person around them. Claire looked at him. I think that's one of the best things you've ever said to me. Yeah? Yeah, she said. Genuinely. He nodded. He looked out the window at the open sky. I don't want to be the kind of husband who needs to be told to choose his wife. You're not, she said. You chose me 4 days ago when you made that phone call. That was a real choice. The hardest kind. It shouldn't have taken this long. No, she agreed. But it didn't take forever. That matters. The weeks that followed were not easy. Diane was cold on the phone for the first 2 weeks. Not cruel, just cool, a specific variant of withdrawal that Claire recognized as punishment. Gerald sent Nathan a measured email about family loyalty that Nathan read once and did not respond to for 4 days, and when he did respond, it was with the same steady, clear tone he had used on the phone in Maui. Nathan started seeing a therapist in the 3rd week back. He went on Thursdays. He didn't share everything with Claire. It wasn't her space. But he did say, after the 3rd session, "I've been doing this my whole life, managing her feelings instead of having my own. I didn't have a name for it before." "And now?" Claire asked. "Now I do," he said simply. Diane called on a Sunday in October, 6 weeks after Maui. It was the first time she had called willingly, without being called first. She asked how they were. She asked about Claire's work. She did not bring up Hawaii. At the end of the call, she said stiffly that she was looking forward to seeing them at Thanksgiving. It was not an apology. Claire knew it might never be one, not a real one, not the kind that required Diane to fully reckon with what she had done. Some people didn't have that capacity. You learned to stop waiting for it and to decide instead what you could live with and what you could not. What Claire could live with, she had decided, was a relationship with her in-laws that was cordial and bounded and honest. What she could not live with was a marriage where the bounds were set by someone else. Thanksgiving arrived. They drove to the Hartwell house, a big colonial in Naperville, the same house Nathan had grown up in, and Claire helped set the table and Nathan helped his father with the turkey, and Diane moved through the kitchen with her customary command, and it was strange and a little formal and nothing like the easy warmth Claire had once hoped for. But at some point in the afternoon, she found herself standing at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching Nathan and his father walk across the backyard together, talking. Not Gerald monologuing while Nathan nodded. Actually talking. Nathan gesturing, making a point. Gerald listening with his arms crossed, which was just how Gerald listened, but listening. Something small and real was happening. It might take years. It might never be complete. But it was movement, and movement, Claire had come to understand, was its own form of grace. Diane came to stand beside her at the window. "He's different," Diane said. She wasn't looking at Claire. She was looking at her son. "Yes," Claire said. "I don't always understand it." A pause. "But he seems settled." "He is," Claire said. Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she turned back to her pie crust and said nothing more, and Claire understood that this, for now, was as much as there was. And she decided it was enough to build on. That night, driving home on the expressway with the Chicago skyline in the distance and Nathan's hand resting on her knee, Claire thought about the woman she had been on that lanai in Maui, standing at the railing with trembling hands, having just done the most necessary thing she had ever done. She thought about what it had cost her and what it had given back. She thought about the sea turtle she had watched surface and disappear, unhurried and entirely itself. You couldn't control what surfaced around you. You couldn't manage away the difficult things or schedule them for a more convenient time. What you could do, what you had to do if you wanted a real life, was decide who you were in relation to them. Decide where you stood. Hold that ground with as much love and as much clarity as you could summon. She had done that. She was still doing it. "Hey," Nathan said. "Hey," she said. "Good day?" She considered. "Yeah," she said. "Actually, yeah. Good day."